Good evening and welcome to our fifth Virtual Star Live session of 2021. My name is Estavian Ward, and tonight I'll be sharing a few things about myself as we typically do in orientation programs. I'll start with my role at Purdue. So I'm a program coordinator for orientation programs, and I get the honor to directly supervise and oversee all of our 700 plus student leaders. In addition to that, I am originally from Grand Rapids, Michigan, and my pronouns are she, her, hers. Before we get started, I have just a couple quick reminders. First, we are in the third week of Virtual Star. Last week, we announced that for every person that completes V-Star before the end of May, $1 will be donated to the ACE Campus Food Pantry. The ACE Campus Food Pantry helps combat hunger on the Purdue campus, and a $1 donation can provide up to 1 day's worth of food for our fellow Boilermakers. We're excited to share that with still a few days left, over 3,300 students have completed V-Star. So 3,300, yes, you heard that correct, will be going to the ACE Campus Food Pantry. You have until the end of the day on Monday to be included in this, so we hope that you'll strongly consider completing V-Star before then. Second, as a reminder, students will need to complete and review the V-Star modules in Brightspace and meet with their academic advisor no later than June 30th. With the recent announcement that Purdue will be welcoming the largest class ever. Let me say that again. The largest class ever. The sooner you complete V-Star, the sooner you can meet with your academic advisor to preference your first semester courses. Tonight's session will focus on parent and family experiences. And we have 4 outstanding panelists who are here to talk about their journey as supporters of Purdue students. Moderating tonight's session is Kelly Steer, Director of External Relations for the Office of the Vice Provost for Student Life. Without further ado, I'll pass it over to Kelly to get us started.
Thanks, Estavian. We're really happy to be here this evening with parents, family members, and just spending some time talking to those of you who are getting excited about Purdue and sharing some experiences from our parents and family members who have students who have experienced Purdue, and they will have some great perspectives, some great advice, some great personal stories and experiences from their families that we hope will be helpful to you as you're looking forward to your Purdue journey as well. As Estavian said, I also oversee parent and family connections here at Purdue. So we are really excited to be working with many of our families. We hope that we've been able to support you already and look forward to continuing to support you during your Purdue journey. So we have several questions for our panelists tonight, and we want to make sure that we have time to get through all of those questions, to share their experiences, and then also to grab some questions from the audience if we have enough time here at the end that you might want to ask our panelists as well. So before we jump into those questions, we want you to know who's with us tonight and a little bit more about their family, their experiences, and what their students may have studied or been involved in here at Purdue. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to April Rodriguez first and ask them to introduce themselves.
Hi, my name is David, and I'm originally from Gary, Indiana, and attended Purdue in the early 90s, but I've been living in Arizona for 25 or so years. So our kids were raised there, but they both decided to go to Purdue. Our son, Noah, just graduated in computer engineering just a few weeks ago. So he's heading off to work for Texas Instruments in Dallas. Something interesting about his time at Purdue, which we were impressed with all of the things that were available, I guess, to him as a student. And he ended up working for the athletic department as an intern, doing sports photography, which he loves to do. So that was just a neat experience for him.
I'm April Rodriguez, and I am, well, actually both of us are alumni from Purdue with our electrical engineering degrees. And we also have a daughter who is attending Purdue currently. She just finished her sophomore year in actuarial science. And, one of her motivations for I guess, continuing the trend of going to Purdue was just the strength of the program that Purdue had.
Great, thank you both. And we'll hear from you both a little bit more coming up here. Ava, would you want to tell us a little bit more about yourself, your students, and where you're tuning in from tonight?
Yes, hi, good evening, everyone. I'm Eva Woodruff, and I'm joining from Warsaw, Poland. So it's middle of the night for us. I am originally from Poland. My husband was from US, and I have two children at Purdue. My daughter just graduated she received a bachelor's degree in psychology, and my son's a senior. My daughter is still continuing at Purdue, doing master's program for the next year. We spent most of our lives in Asia, so my kids considered Hong Kong as their home. So when they joined Purdue, they really felt like they are coming from Hong Kong and not from anywhere else. They never lived in the United States, although they are American citizens. So yeah, both of them are there.
Great, thank you. And Kim, do you want to wrap us up with sharing a little bit more about yourself and your student and family?
Sure. My name is Kim Pullman. I'm really excited to be here. And I have a daughter, Alyssa, who goes to Purdue. She just finished her sophomore year, and she is a computer science major. I'm here in Indianapolis, and actually we have lived in areas not overseas, but around the country, but we're here in Indianapolis now and excited to be here. Alyssa has had a great 2 years. She's been very involved in different activities on campus. She lived in a residential computer science floor her first year, and that was absolutely a fantastic experience for her. She met people in her major. She's still really good friends with them. They are planning to visit over the summer. She was able to join, I think, the Women in Computer Science Club, and she's a marketing coordinator. And she also ended up going through Sorority Rush and joined a sorority and is helping with a lot of the academic type roles with that. So that's a little bit about Alyssa and a little bit about us.
Perfect. So the first question I have is hopefully a pretty easy one, but I think it's helpful to make these connections as we're talking about different experiences and ways to support students at Purdue. So if each of you can maybe tell us a little bit briefly about why your family ended up choosing Purdue. And maybe we'll start with Kim, since you were just speaking with us.
That's really easy for us. When we were looking at schools, it was really about the academic program first. So we really did some research, and she was Purdue we applied to because it has such a fabulous reputation for computer science. It's in addition to that, it's a global reputation. So that was probably the reason that attracted us. Interestingly enough, she had a hard time. She really thought she wanted to go to a smaller school, but the minute she actually went on Purdue's campus, it's just a beautiful campus. And, you know, there were a lot of other schools, and she could have played golf, and that was part of things she was considering, but really the academics really led us to Purdue as a start.
Same for our family. The academics was very important to my children. Different opportunities and really the wonderful campus and very friendly people that are there. That all around Indiana. It's like a true American experience for my children. So that was an easy choice for us.
Yeah, and for our son, he was looking around and had actually quite a few really great opportunities at great engineering schools. ultimately boiled down to a couple. And he wanted a traditional college experience, which I think not all engineering schools necessarily have. So things like, Big Ten sports, for example, a college campus that's maybe a little bit more of a true college campus than something that's an urban campus. So it's kind of a combination of all those things, but also the value for that quality education. So I think they just announced today Purdue's on its 10th year of tuition freeze. And he went through all 4 years, and our daughter's 2 years in, and the tuition's been the same. So has the residence hall fees. And so he at the end said, there's maybe one other school I would go to, but I can't justify this difference. And I really like everything I'm seeing at Purdue. So if you have, and as April said, our daughter was interested in actuarial science, and Purdue has a top rated program, and she had some experience there and always had a positive time, with, she was mentored actually by someone when she was picking her college career who was a recent Purdue grad. So that kind of helped things out too.
Thank you all for sharing that. I think it's always really interesting to hear so many different perspectives of the why Purdue is a good fit and a good choice for students and their families. And hopefully folks out there listening are connecting with some of the stories that you're sharing and the reasons why that you chose Purdue as well. So I want to bring up a word that's probably familiar to all of us this year, transition. I think we've all probably felt some sort of transition sense in the past year plus. And so now we're going to talk about that when we think about a possible transition to Purdue. So a couple of things I wanted to ask you maybe to talk through is sharing maybe what made you nervous or anxious about a transition to college, to Purdue in general. What did you find to be helpful during that time? And how long did you feel like you as a parent or family member was in that transition process of your student being part of Purdue? Sorry, I forgot to start with someone. Why don't we ask Ava to go ahead and get started?
Me? Kelly. Okay, sorry, I didn't hear that. Yeah, actually everything made me nervous. Everything made me nervous. My kids have never lived in the United States. We lived in Hong Kong for many years, in Philippines as well. And just, we were very close-knit family. We really, the separation, the distance, the 15-hour flights, was such a mess, but it was for my peace of mind, kind of like I couldn't go to sleep if I didn't know that they are just fine. And the conversations were not long, and they continue. But I just wanted to make sure that they are okay. So we had this deal that I call them or they call me for just a short time to tell me that they are okay. And sometimes they get annoyed and they say, Mom, you're a helicopter mom, and who calls their kids every day? But I need it, and I just want to make sure that everything is okay. What makes it easier for me also was to have the contact details to their roommates, to the people they live in their dorms, or the neighbors, that someone, I felt a little bit more calm if I knew that I can reach out to someone else to check on them. I also have an email address to their advisors, the academic advisors that just to check on them if they are okay. I have joined. Another thing that was helpful is joining the Facebook Purdue parents groups for each of the graduation class year. There are separate groups, and parents are very supportive of each other, and they answer questions. And also Purdue moms at at the non-COVID times are super helpful. I remember my son being sick one time and then they delivered chicken soup to him because I couldn't be there and I couldn't help any other way. So those are the little things that, oops, sorry, my cat. So that those were just the things that were helpful for us.
I guess I can talk a little bit about what helped in our transition period. What I was most nervous about was Purdue was a big school for us, Big Ten, a lot of students. Both of my two older, my daughter is the youngest, so I have two boys, and they went to small private colleges in the East Coast. So I was just so nervous about how much bigger Purdue was. And the other thing I would say I was really nervous about is somehow I had it in my head that because it was so much bigger, you know, she wouldn't have the faculty advising and some of the academic advising that, you know, I thought, oh, if you're at a small school, you have, you know, a little bit better or different academic advising. And so I don't know why, but I was kind of zeroed in on those couple of things. And honestly, going up in the summer for the, you know, for the program where you sign up for classes and all that, and then just the first probably semester of her freshman year, I realized that Purdue was in fact much more friendly and warm and welcoming, probably just maybe some of the examples Ava just gave, but never in a minute did it ever feel big. In fact, in some ways, I think my daughter's experience is much more, she seems to have gotten more opportunities and more attention than, you know, than my sons in some ways that attended smaller, you know, private schools. And so that whole first semester, I was constantly amazed at just how easy it was for her to go to see her academic advisor when she had a question, or, you know, the faculty she went and, you know, she had a couple questions or something she didn't understand, but there was none of this, wow, it's really big, people aren't available. It was sort of like all hands on deck or whatever, but she had a really good experience and had no problems, you know, getting questions answered or help. And in fact, it felt so small and people were very warm and very friendly. And I was really impressed with the advising. In fact, I felt like having professionals that do the advising actually was better. She actually got really good advice about, you know, what classes to take or, you know, any of those things. So it didn't take longer than somewhere in the first semester for me to feel a lot more comfortable. And she was probably worried about some of the same things because she went to a small high school. There were only about 100 kids graduated in her class, and Purdue actually, it has felt small and friendly and warm from day one. And I don't know if it's just how the people there, you know, all the staff are so friendly, but I do feel like my daughter had more help and more assistance and people watching out for her than she could get almost anywhere. So it was actually a lot easier transition from that standpoint than we thought it would be. So it was maybe an easy adjustment when I guess we were expecting something different. And in terms of being in contact, I mean, we kind of text. So our thing is more texting back and forth. But in fact, she texts me more during college just to kind of, I don't know if it was check in, but just kind of say, oh, you know, I got to do this today, or I went to this Women in Computer Science Club, or I tried this, or I tried that. And I learned, at least from my perspective, that the best thing to do was to just answer back in text, and it worked really well. And in fact, I would say from a parent perspective, Purdue and kind of the opportunities and her wanting to share some of that probably made us even closer than we already were during that first year. So that was kind of our experience in the time frame for, being anxious or not, and looking forward to it. And to be honest, we also had kind of a scary story. It was actually in January, starting her, just in the first week there, she ended up with, she got the flu really bad. And so I actually had to use, she called me, of course, because your kids call you when they're sick, but she felt like she was too sick to walk over to the health center. And so of course she calls me, and you're sitting there, no matter how many miles away you are, there's nothing you can do. So my biggest recommendation is you have that parent hotline number programmed in your cell phone, because I called that number, somebody answers it all the time. She had to call the Purdue paramedics. They came right away. She went to the hospital within that. Everybody kept me updated. And it was, she was fine. She needed fluid. She was pretty sick with the flu, but it was really an easy process. So I guess my learning point is that parent hotline number works and you can use it anytime, and you'll get assistance or questions answered very quickly. So.
Thanks. And I'll share our office contact information here at the end too. So if anyone's looking for that. I don't know, Dave and April, do you have anything you wanted to share too?
Sure. I'd say for us at that time, with our son anyway, we were fortunate enough to be able to do STAR in person. So that kind of launched things pretty nicely for us, in the sense that we were a little bit a part of that experience. So we kind of had a sense for what was happening, what the structure was going to be, what the registration process was. And we also had the opportunity to, just kind of meet the advisor. Our son met with her independently, but we got at least to, meet the face. And everyone was so friendly. And then similarly, when we went to move in that first weekend at the beginning of the semester, at the residence halls, they just had, the whole campus was hyped up with a band, and they were so welcoming, and people were in the residence halls, ready to help, and everyone was super friendly. And even the staff was there, they were available. So we got to meet some of them. So just, knowing that everybody was available and, putting forth their best effort to make your child feel comfortable, or your student. And then I would also say, like, the Parent and Family Connections they would put out like a newsletter regularly. And I thought that was really helpful because it just has tips and things to think about as a parent of a child who's just going off to college, and, things to think about, like, how are you, what's your expectation for communicating with them? Do you want to call every day? Do you want to call once a week? Do you want to text or whatever? So they had some nice tips and things to think about as well. And then I would also highly recommend participating in the Boiler or Gold Rush orientation program for those of, that it's offered to, just because it is an opportunity to, you don't have to attend every activity, but I think for both of our students, they each met people in those programs that they're still in contact with. So at least it kind of gives you some connection there. And then for us to help also use the transition we had while they were in high school, we had sort of created like a family Snapchat group. And so when they went off to college, they just sort of naturally would, every now and then send us maybe once a day or something, send us a snap of them, somewhere they're walking on campus, or a little note that they wanted to share with the family. So it just kind of made us feel a little more comfortable, because we were at least in touch and knew that they were safe and healthy and everything was good.
Great. Thank you all for sharing that. Did you have something to add, Dave?
Oh, no, I was thinking, just highlighting what she said. I had forgotten about it, but just having that quick conversation with your student before they ever go to campus and say, how do you want this to look? We did that with our son, and especially boys that age aren't terribly communicative, but it was a short conversation. It was kind of like, hey, do you want us to call you? Do you want to call us? Do you want to do it at certain times? And he didn't have as much of a certain expectation, but we kind of had that discussion and outlined what each of us wanted, because they're going through a transition too, right? So our transition is their transition, and so if you can talk about it ahead of time, I think it helps to prevent those different perspectives from colliding.
And I would second that. I think that you have to let them kind of, at least I found it work best. I mean, I wouldn't have picked text as my major communication maybe, but it does really help because that's what they're most comfortable in. And it just kind of grows. I was telling this group earlier that it was really during the whole pandemic, my daughter started walking outside because she just, she didn't want to work out in the small enclosed quarters or whatever. And so then it kind of gravitated towards, just, hey, Mom, do you want to walk and talk at the same time? And so before you knew it, we'd be on the phone, 30 minutes, an hour, whatever. But it's just letting them take the lead. I think that's really good. At least that was a very good advice and seemed to help with my daughter for sure.
That was actually a really good segue, whether you know it or not, into my next question, which I was going to bring up a little bit about the process that you've learned with your students to work through when they might have a problem to solve or something that they're struggling with, they're looking for advice on, they're trying to figure it out. And there's definitely this transition period that we're talking a lot about tonight where families may be moving a little bit from right there with them in the moment, solving the problem, to hearing little bits about it, maybe getting the panicked phone call every once in a while where your student's kind of letting off some steam. So could you share with us a little bit, and maybe we'll go back to Ava real quick. What are the steps and the tactics and maybe even the resources that you use to help your student problem solve?
That's an interesting question. So we use a lot of coaching conversations, ask questions to help them go through the process, from the beginning of what's happening. But they also they have they very quickly find a little bit a friend group. Yep. So the friends really support each other, and often parents are not really the first one to find out about the problems. I think we find out when it's already kind of in the process, but sometimes they if it's a medical problem, they definitely go to push to ask for medical health advice. There are psychological also resources, right, available at university, but mostly I think they rely on their friends group to solve the problems. That's from my side.
Yeah, so we have maybe somewhat unique, maybe not completely. I think there's probably other people in this boat where April and I both studied engineering at Purdue, and our son was making that transition into engineering. And so a lot of times he would ask for, things like academic resources that we knew of and things like that, which I think he could have figured out himself, but at the same time, we'd have a conversation and he would ask if we knew about it. And we would point him in a direction. But I think the big adjustment for us as parents is you're not as involved. And so you can really just offer the information and offer the advice. But it's really up to them to walk to the tutoring center or the math department or wherever it is needs to be. And we kind of tried to back off from what how involved we were in regards to academics in that time period, because eventually, they have to do it themselves, right? So there's just a bit of an adjustment there. But it's interesting too, because both of my kids, I think somebody had mentioned the parent Facebook group, and there's just a tremendous amount of information on there that even the students wouldn't be expected to know. I think there's so many things going on and so many people involved across the school that you start to find out things that just before your kids do even. And so initially there were some jokes about the parent page and all this stuff, but then by the end of the 4 years that they're there, they would actually reach out to me and ask, hey, can you ask in the parent group about this, that, or the other? And so it was just kind of that process of, like I said, sort of letting go, sort of being there when they asked questions, and then pretty soon it just kind of starts to turn around, at least in our experience.
We had, it's a very similar conversation. I think they go to their friend group first. I totally 100% agree with that. And I mean, they will make wonderful friends at Purdue, and that actually has been a comfort for me, especially as I've gotten to know some of them. But the other thing I did is I just like to know, okay, well, if things come up, then I want to be somewhat knowledgeable, right? So I would say that I called in freshman year to all those parent family topics, and there were a lot. I mean, it was amazing. They're about a residence life or career services or, the counseling center, the academic advising, all of that. And it was really helpful for me because you don't have to be an expert, but you just need to know it's there, and you can easily Google it and find it, and you can remind them of things that they probably heard or learned during orientation, but they just forgot about. And that was how I used it. I found it most helpful when my daughter got really nervous. She was very careful about COVID, and it was hard this year because she lived in a sorority house, right? So, it's really hard to be really safe when you're in a community living situation. And so she was anxious about a lot of things. And so it was really nice that I could say, okay, well, here's some resources, or, hey, they're doing these online things or whatever. And everything worked out wonderfully, but it was just nice to kind of have that as a backup. So I do think that, the parent and family, webinars and all of that are pretty timely, especially that, first or second year when you're trying to learn things, and they are too. So that was just a little bit of our experience.
Thanks, Kim. Thanks for sharing that. That's all great advice and so helpful. Thank you for kind of opening up and sharing your stories. I hope it's helpful for those that are watching. One thing I want to go back to that we kind of started talking about, but I want to dig in a little bit deeper on specifics if you're open and willing to share. We started talking about some of the conversations that families could have with students prior to their student making the transition to Purdue. And some of the things we've talked a little bit about communication that's helpful. There are other topics out there that we know that families find helpful, from communication to how do you communicate about academics. We know that the access that parents and family members have once a student enters a higher education institution changes. And so how do you have some of those conversations about grades and wellness and self-care and all the things that we're talking about? What did you find most important to talk with your student about during this kind of typical time frame that we're in now leading up to that transition? Maybe we'll start with Dave and April this time.
Yeah, I think that was actually probably one of the tougher areas that we had, because like I said, in high school, and especially with our son being the first one, I don't know if all sons and daughters are the same, but our son tends to procrastinate more than our daughter does, and maybe be a little less organized and kind of wing it and all that. And so conversations that we had aside from the communication stuff probably had to do with, kind of reminding him that there was a shift going on and that academically he was going to become more independent, but also, that whatever consequences were coming down the line were things like, getting internships and eventually jobs and things like that, and doing what he wanted to do. But we also tried to let him know that, whatever that while all of that was the goal and all of that was important, that his mental health was just, was more important. And we, again, having been through it, know how stressful the program can be sometimes. And I think that's one thing I guess I want to mention to parents too, is that I've heard it over and over, and I've seen it with my son and his friends that coming out of high school, they can be rock stars, A+, 4.0 students, and all kinds of awards. And they hit, college, in particular, some of the Purdue's known for not being having grade inflation, for example, and so there can be a shock, especially to really good, strong students, that when they start to get those lower grades and challenges and things like that. And so some of those conversations also came along the lines of that mental health, understanding that there's going to be some failures, and that the mental health portion was the most important. And even to the point where you might maybe proactively, go to the to CAPS and the Counseling Center, right, and see if there's some group sessions you want to be a part of or whatever as you go through the process. He didn't do that, but we kind of put that out there ahead of time, right? So he knew that there was an escape route if he was feeling too much pressure.
And he also took advantage of the, for him, because he really enjoys sports, one thing that helped manage his stress were the intramural sports. So he was really active in those, especially the first couple of years. And I think that was, just to encourage them to have something set aside, some time where they can have time to just play or relax, and then knowing that then they have to, go back and refocus, but trying to, strike that balance.
Yeah, it was really interesting to think back on this, because I actually was talking to my daughter a couple of weeks ago about kind of some of these questions, because we had the conversation about being proactive and taking care of yourself, eat right, all the kinds of things that you do, say, as a parent, and you kind of hope they do it. But we were talking about it, and, they have to find that right balance for themselves between having fun and, trying new things and all the time that can take, and then all their academics. And it is, these are hard programs, and it is challenging and all that. But it's funny. That's what my daughter said is, the biggest thing I had to learn my freshman year was kind of that balance. So, in her case, she said, I think I was like a little bit too much on the academic side, and I didn't, not that she didn't try clubs and things, because she's definitely involved in things, but she said, that what she took her whole first year was really to balance it so that it wasn't all only academic. So I think that's where you can support them as a parent is, every kid is different, is how do they find that right balance, and how do you support them in doing that, and just reminding them of things. So and now, after finishing her sophomore year, she feels like she has a, kind of a much better balance, and it's not just as focused on kind of the academic side, and she's learned how to do that. But I think it takes some time for them to transition and get there.
So for our family, we definitely had the conversations about how to stay safe and where to turn for help if the help is needed, how to stay healthy, also how to budget money, spendings. That was a big thing. one thing that was very helpful for the kids and for us as parents is my husband created a list with all the phone numbers to different departments and to different people at Purdue. And he was really good at picking up a phone and calling them and connecting with people, making personal connections, just asking questions. And he encouraged kids to do the same. I think today the kids are you know, they have some reservations when they talk to adults, or they don't really like to talk to strangers maybe, but my husband really encouraged that personal connection, just simply picking up the phone. And that's why he created those lists with phone numbers, so the kids can just say, okay, if I have a problem in the dorm, I can call this number. If I have a, you know, if I need to go to the doctor, this is the number to push. And they didn't have to search it. It was just there for them. So we had those, you know, conversations with them. Just because we were so far away, I think that's maybe why we needed to feel that they are organized in that sense.
Yeah, that's a great practical tip too, and lots of really good conversation starters here that hopefully as you have a couple of weeks or months ahead, that might be helpful to think about. Before we go to audience questions, I do have one more question that I'd like to ask our panelists, and maybe something that you haven't shared already, if you can think of it, is if you could give one piece of advice to families who are just beginning their Purdue journey, what would that piece of advice be? And I'll probably just let whoever jump in first if you're taking a moment to think about it.
I don't have to think about it. I think it's just, you have to let them take the lead. And you just have to support them because they need to kind of learn how to do it on their own. And so that was kind of what worked for us. And I think that it's helped her to take advantage of, you know, just meeting people and trying new things and all of that, but they have to kind of do it on their own time. So very much tried to let them be sort of in charge and all of that, and stand back and just play a supportive role as needed.
So for us, for our kids, I think, you know, we encourage them to take advantage of all the opportunities that Purdue offers. It's an incredible school. It's one of the best schools in the world, I would say, and really it offers so much to students. One thing that my daughter enjoyed was the semester abroad, the opportunity to go overseas. She went to Ireland, and this was an experience for her, incredible experience that she will always remember for the rest of her life, I think. And my son joined ROTC. That's completely different experience altogether. But there are many opportunities that students can take advantage of. Clubs, teams, really, you can support all your interests, passions, and everything that you need is there. So parents should feel just really relaxed and calm and know that their kids are in good hands.
I would piggyback on that in the sense that Purdue has a tremendous amount of resources, but a little bit more specifically, one piece of advice that I thought was really good from a speaker that came to campus when the students were just, you know, I think it's their first move-in weekend, is Harlan Cohen. And he kind of talks about the transition of going away to college. And, you know, he has a book and everything about what to expect and everything. And one of the big takeaways that I thought was really good in there was that you should encourage your student to try to develop at least 3 different friend groups when they're first starting out. So, and one of the ways to do that is by joining a variety of clubs, or join some intramural sports, or, you know, connect with some people in the dorm, connect with some people in your major. And part of the reason behind that is that if, you know, when you're first transitioning to the school, you don't know anybody maybe, or maybe you only know a couple people, and it can feel lonely. And so you're really sort of, I don't want to say desperate, but you're anxious to, meet some people you can hang out with and feel more comfortable with. But sometimes you realize after you start to develop that relationship more that maybe you're not, as connected as you'd like to be, or maybe you're not on the same page as much in terms of your interests as you might be. So by having multiple friend groups, not only are you diversifying your experience of all the types of people you can meet, but you also have an opportunity to sort of break up, your time and the people that you spend your time with, so that, if one friend group doesn't end up working out or whatever, or, you're not connecting as well as you'd hoped, you still have other people that you can hang out with. You haven't basically put all your eggs in one basket kind of thing.
Yeah, and I'm just going to throw out or kind of highlight what April mentioned before about having a family chat of some sort. So if you have the opportunity to do it now, if you don't already have it, setting up something with the entire family that's just a group that we use Snapchat. So the kids will just send out random things, or we might throughout the day that we think the family would be interested in. But it's kind of amazing to me, like after, our son was there and our daughter's there, if they go quiet a little bit, maybe they're really busy or whatever the case is, and you start to worry a little bit, but then suddenly just, I don't know, a picture of a couch cart or some random thing, picture that they send comes across, and they don't even say anything, but you just see that picture and you kind of say, okay, they communicated with me. They're obviously a little bit relaxed because they're sending something silly. And so it just kind of has a nice way of keeping everybody connected, and us as parents to be less worried about them without a lot of effort on anybody's part. So, but having that now, I think, at least for us, when we had it in high school, it was just a completely natural transition when they went to Purdue. So we found it helpful.
Those are all great pieces of advice. Thank you. I know that, many of these are personal stories to your family. So thank you for sharing them. I'm sure that there's probably been some connection points made and some helpful things that families may be able to do as they're getting ready for this transition. I'm going to ask Estavian to make her way back on in. And as she's doing that, I just wanted to share our contact information in our office really quickly before we go to questions, in case families do want to reach out with additional questions of things that we've talked about here tonight. So our office, Parent and Family Connections, can be reached at email, parents, PARENTS, @purdue.edu. So parents@purdue.edu. Or the phone line that Kim was talking about. We are open weekdays, and our phone number there is 765-496-0524. So one more time, that's 765-496-0524. And I'll turn it on over to Estavian for some questions from the audience.
All righty. So we actually do not have any questions from the audience. So I'm just going to close this out and give a huge thank you to all that watched tonight and to our panelists for sharing their perspectives in tonight's session. Thanks additionally to Kelly Steer for moderating tonight's panel. Finally, thanks to Ed Dunn for helping us with the live stream and orientation programs team behind the scenes, helping with the questions on YouTube. As a reminder, we hope that students are able to complete V-STAR by the end of the day on Monday so that their completion can add $1 to the donation to the ACE Campus Food Pantry. And we hope you are able to join us next Thursday morning at 9 a.m. for our next session, focusing on international student experiences. Until next time, have a great night and boiler up.